Millionaire recognizes a beggar with 2 children. What he did leave you shocked. On a freezing winter night, the streets were unforgiving. Emily Winters sat on a desolate corner. Her 2 children huddled beside her under a threadbare blanket. The icy wind bit at her face as she whispered softly to her youngest, Liam, who shivered in her lap. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Her eldest, 12-year-old Ellie, clung to her side, her wide eyes scanning the dark streets for some sign of safety. The faint glow of a flickering street lamp cast long shadows across the icy pavement, barely enough to pierce the gloom, as Emily adjusted the blanket around Liam, trying to shield him from the biting cold. A sleek black car pulled up to the nearby intersection. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on the frost-covered ground. Jacob Calloway, a renowned millionaire and owner of the towering skyscraper just steps away, paused mid-stride. His usual focus on deadlines and meetings was interrupted by the scene before him, a mother and her 2 children fighting against the elements, their faces etched with desperation. Jacob's gaze lingered on the woman, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes. Could it be? He stepped closer, narrowing his gaze as memories began to surface. Emily, now unrecognizable to most, was someone he had known long ago. The ambitious, bright-eyed girl he remembered had transformed into this weary figure. As their eyes met, her breath hitched, and her whispered words to her children halted. In that instant, Jacob saw not just a stranger in need, but a connection to his past that he could not ignore. Jacob froze as his sharp gaze locked with Emily's tired eyes. Her once vibrant face was now pale and gaunt, framed by strands of hair that had lost their shine. She pulled the blanket tighter around her youngest child, her hands trembling from the cold and exhaustion. Her eldest child leaned against her, clutching her arm for warmth and security. The sight was a stark contrast to the woman Jacob had known years ago, a bright, determined girl with a laugh that used to light up the classroom. Memories flooded his mind, shared group projects, playful banter, and the dreams Emily had spoken of so passionately. But how had life brought her here? The street corner was a picture of despair, illuminated by the weak glow of a flickering street lamp. Frost clung to the edges of the pavement, and the faint sound of traffic hummed in the distance. Jacob's polished shoes stood out against the cracked sidewalk, a stark reminder of the vast difference between their worlds. He couldn't shake the image of the 2 children nestled against Emily, their small faces barely visible beneath the tattered blanket. The younger boy coughed softly in his sleep, a dry, painful sound that made Jacob's chest tighten. Emily's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she dropped her gaze, a flush of shame creeping over her cheeks. Jacob, uncharacteristically at a loss for words, stepped closer. "Emily, it's me, Jacob," he said softly, his voice cutting through the cold air. Her eyes snapped up wide with disbelief. Recognition flickered across her face, quickly replaced by something else, uncertainty, maybe even fear. "Jacob?" she murmured, her voice hoarse. Her eldest child, sensing the tension, clung more tightly to her. Emily blinked rapidly, as if trying to reconcile the man standing before her with the memory she held. Jacob's tailored suit and confident demeanor seemed so out of place in her world of struggle and survival. "Is it really you?" "It's me," he replied, his tone gentler than it had been in years. He crouched down to her level, ignoring the cold that seeped through his expensive coat. "What happened, Emily?" "How did you—" His voice trailed off, not knowing how to finish the sentence without sounding accusatory or insensitive. Emily swallowed hard, her grip on her children tightening. "It's a long story," she finally said, her voice cracking. "But I never thought I'd see you again." The way she said it, a mix of relief and hesitation, stirred something deep within Jacob. This wasn't the reunion either of them had envisioned, but as he looked at her and her children, he realized this moment would change everything. The icy wind swirled around them, carrying with it the hum of distant traffic and the faint chatter of people hurrying through the bustling city. Yet on that small, dimly lit corner, time seemed to stand still as Jacob and Emily exchanged words that held the weight of years and unspoken stories. Jacob crouched down further, bringing himself to eye level with Emily. The polished fabric of his tailored coat brushed against the frosted pavement, a stark contrast to the tattered blanket barely keeping her children warm. "Emily, how did it come to this?" Jacob's voice was steady, but there was a tremor of disbelief beneath it. His sharp, calculating mind, which could solve multi-million-dollar problems, struggled to grasp how someone so capable had fallen into such despair. Emily hesitated, her eyes darting to her children as if seeking strength from their presence. "Life happened," she said at last, her voice raw and trembling. "After college, I had dreams, Jacob, a career, a family, a home. But then, things fell apart. My husband passed away 2 years ago." Her words broke and she exhaled shakily, fighting to keep her composure. "We lost everything. I tried to hold on for them." She gestured toward her children, her hand trembling. "But it wasn't enough." Jacob's chest tightened as he processed her words. Emily, who had once been the brightest student in their class, who had dreamed of making a difference in the world, was now fighting to keep her family alive. He glanced at the children. The boy, Liam, stirred under the blanket, his small face scrunching up as he let out another rattling cough. The girl, Ellie, sat upright, her wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and protectiveness as she clung to her mother's side. "What about your family?" Jacob asked softly. "Friends? Didn't anyone?" He stopped himself, realizing how hollow the words sounded. Emily shook her head, the weariness in her expression deepening. "My parents passed years ago, and I couldn't ask anyone for help. I was too proud at first, and then too ashamed. People don't want to know when you're drowning. They look away." Her voice hardened slightly, not with anger, but with the resignation of someone who had faced rejection too many times. Jacob felt a pang of guilt. How many times had he walked past people like Emily, assuming their situations were self-inflicted, their struggles distant from his reality? And yet, here she was, someone he had once known, someone who had once been full of life, now reduced to begging for survival. His eyes softened as he looked at her. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore, Emily." The words surprised even him, their sincerity cutting through the cold. Emily's gaze snapped to his, a flicker of hope breaking through the exhaustion. For the first time that night, the relentless cold seemed to ease, replaced by something neither of them could fully understand just yet. Jacob hesitated, his words hanging in the frosty air as Emily stared at him, unsure whether to believe what she had just heard. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore," he repeated, his tone firm yet gentle. He stood, towering over her and her children, but his gaze held no judgment, only compassion. The street lamp above cast a soft light on his face, highlighting the sincerity in his expression. Emily swallowed hard, her hands instinctively tightening around Liam, who had started to stir. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the wind. She had heard empty promises before, kind strangers who walked away. The moment it became inconvenient to help, but something about Jacob felt different. There was a weight to his words, as if he had already made a decision he wouldn't back away from. "I mean," Jacob began, his voice steady, "I want to help. You and the kids. You don't belong out here." He gestured at the cold, desolate street around them. "Come with me. Let's get you somewhere warm, at least for tonight." Emily's heart raced, a mix of hope and caution flooding her chest. "You don't have to do this, Jacob," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Jacob cut her off gently but firmly. He crouched down again, his gaze level with hers. "Emily, you were one of the brightest people I knew. You were going to change the world. And look at what you've done for your kids, even with nothing to your name. That's strength. That's resilience. Let me help you get back on your feet." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, glancing at Ellie, who was watching the exchange intently. "I don't know," she began, her voice trembling. The weight of years of hardship had taught her to be wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. But Liam coughed again, his small body shaking against her chest, and she knew she couldn't let her pride stand in the way of his health. Jacob saw her hesitation and stood, offering his hand. "Please, Emily, just trust me. One night, and if you don't feel comfortable, you can walk away. No strings attached." Emily looked up at him, her vision blurred by tears that had begun to spill. She glanced down at her children, Ellie, with her wary but curious gaze, and Liam, whose small, feverish face broke her heart. Taking a deep breath, she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Jacob smiled faintly, relief washing over him as he motioned for her to follow. "You're doing the right thing," he assured her. As he led them toward his sleek car parked nearby, Emily held her children close, a flicker of hope igniting in the cold darkness. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest sense of relief, like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The car ride was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional cough from Liam. Emily sat stiffly in the plush leather seat, her arms wrapped protectively around her sleeping son. Ellie sat beside her, wide-eyed and nervous, her fingers fidgeting with the frayed edge of the blanket they had carried with them. Jacob glanced at them through the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable, though his grip on the steering wheel was firm. The warmth of the car, a stark contrast to the freezing streets, seemed almost surreal to Emily. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. They pulled up to a towering building, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. Emily stared at the skyscraper, her breath hitching as the realization of where they were sunk in. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Jacob turned off the engine and stepped out, moving quickly to open their door. "Yes," he said simply. "It's not just a place to live, it's a place to regroup. A fresh start." Emily hesitated, clutching Liam tighter as she stepped out of the car. The building loomed above her, its sleek, modern design a world away from the streets she had called home. Ellie clung to her side, her small frame shivering despite the warmth of the car. The doors to the building slid open, revealing a grand lobby bathed in golden light. Marble floors gleamed under the chandelier's glow, and the faint hum of an elevator broke the silence of the space. Emily faltered at the threshold, overwhelmed by the grandeur. Jacob noticed her hesitation and offered a reassuring nod. "It's okay. You're safe here." His voice was steady, almost calming, and it gave Emily the courage to take the first step inside. As they entered, the warmth of the lobby enveloped them, and Emily couldn't help but feel out of place. Her tattered coat and the children's worn clothes stood in sharp contrast to the polished luxury around them. A doorman offered a polite nod to Jacob, his eyes lingering briefly on Emily and her children, but he said nothing. The elevator ride to Jacob's penthouse was quiet, the soft ding of each passing floor the only sound. Ellie leaned into her mother, her small fingers gripping Emily's coat. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "is this real?" Emily knelt to her daughter's height and cupped her face, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know, sweetheart," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But let's take it one step at a time." When the elevator doors opened, Emily gasped softly. The penthouse was breathtaking, a spacious, modern haven with floor-to-ceiling, windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. The children's eyes widened as they took in the plush furniture, the roaring fireplace, and the scent of something warm and inviting wafting from the kitchen. For the first time in years, Emily felt a spark of hope flicker in her chest, fragile but undeniably real. The warmth of the penthouse was almost overwhelming after the bitter cold of the streets. Emily stepped cautiously into the expansive space, her worn shoes scuffing softly against the polished wooden floors. She held Liam close as he stirred in her arms, his small face pressing against her shoulder. Ellie, standing just behind her, glanced around the room with wide eyes, taking in every detail: the soft glow of the fireplace, the towering shelves filled with books, and the comfortable couches that seemed like they belonged in a dream. "Please make yourselves comfortable," Jacob said, gesturing toward the seating area. His tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of urgency, as though he knew they needed to rest immediately. He pressed a button on his phone, and moments later, a housekeeper appeared from a side hallway, her expression kind and understanding. "This is Maria," Jacob explained. "She'll help you with anything you need." Maria smiled warmly, her eyes softening as she took in the exhausted family. "Come with me," she said gently, leading Emily and the children toward a large sofa near the fireplace. "Let's get you warm and comfortable." Emily hesitated for a moment, but the lure of warmth and safety was too strong. She carefully laid Liam down on the couch, tucking a soft throw blanket around his tiny frame. The boy's face relaxed slightly as the warmth began to seep into him, his shallow breathing evening out. Ellie sat down beside him, her hands still clutching the tattered blanket they had brought from the street. Maria returned moments later with a tray of steaming mugs of hot cocoa. The rich chocolatey scent filled the room, and Ellie's eyes lit up as she accepted a mug with trembling hands. "For you too," Maria said, handing one to Emily, who stared at it as though unsure if it was real. As the heat from the mug seeped into her cold fingers, Emily felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just the warmth or the comfort, it was the kindness, something she hadn't experienced in so long. She glanced over at Jacob, who stood by the window, his silhouette framed by the glittering city lights. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. Jacob turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Because I can," he said simply, "and because I should." He walked over to where she sat and lowered himself into a chair across from her. "You don't have to explain anything tonight, Emily, just rest. Take care of the kids. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." Emily's lips trembled as she nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt just a little lighter. As the warmth of the room enveloped her and her children, she allowed herself a small moment of relief, daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. As the hours passed, the room grew quieter, save for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Liam, now nestled comfortably under the thick blanket Maria had provided, slept soundly for the first time in days. His small chest rose and fell steadily, the feverish flush on his cheeks slowly fading. Ellie, her cautious demeanor beginning to soften, sipped the last of her hot cocoa, her hands still clutching the warm mug. She glanced at her mother, her wide eyes searching for reassurance. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her posture still tense despite the comfort around her. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the rim of her mug as she watched her children. It had been so long since she'd seen them safe, warm, and at peace, yet doubt gnawed at her mind. How long would this moment last? Could she really trust Jacob? She looked over at him, now seated in a sleek armchair near the window. He was scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sensing her gaze, Jacob set the phone aside and met her eyes. "You're not used to people helping, are you?" he asked gently. There was no judgment in his tone, only understanding. Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Not anymore," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down at her hands, the years of hardship evident in their roughness. "Life has taught me that help often comes with strings attached." Jacob leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I understand why you'd feel that way," he said, "but I'm not here to ask for anything. Emily, I'm here to help because I want to." He paused, his expression softening. "I can't erase what you've been through, but I can offer a way forward, for you and your kids." Emily studied him, searching for any sign of insincerity. His eyes held hers steadily, and for the first time, she saw something she hadn't expected, genuine care. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You could help anyone. Why stop for me?" Jacob leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Because I remember who you were. You believed in me once when no one else did, and I haven't forgotten that." Emily's throat tightened, emotion threatening to spill over. She had long buried the memories of her younger self, full of ambition, hope, and kindness. Hearing Jacob acknowledge that part of her was like a spark, reigniting something deep within. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling both foreign and freeing. "I don't know what tomorrow holds, but thank you." Jacob smiled warmly. "Tomorrow we'll take the first step, together." For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might bring something more than survival. It might bring a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to find a life she thought she'd lost forever. The next morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jacob's penthouse, bathing the room in a golden glow. Emily stirred from the plush couch where she had dozed off. Feeling more rested than she had in years, she blinked, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings. the luxurious furniture, the quiet hum of the city beyond the glass, and the peaceful stillness that filled the space. For a moment it felt like a dream, but the soft murmurs of Ellie and Liam brought her back to reality. Liam, now sitting upright under the thick blanket, had regained some of his color. Ellie sat cross-legged beside him, feeding him small bites of the toast and fruit Maria had prepared earlier. The sight filled Emily's heart with an unfamiliar sense of relief. For once, her children weren't hungry or cold. For once, they seemed safe. Jacob entered the room carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He handed one to Emily with a faint smile. "Good morning," he said, settling into the armchair across from her. "How are you feeling?" Emily took the mug gratefully, the warmth spreading through her hands. "Better," she admitted. "The kids are better, too." She glanced at Liam, who gave her a small, sleepy smile before returning his attention to Ellie. Jacob nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what we can do next," he began. "You need stability, somewhere permanent, somewhere safe. I can arrange temporary housing for you and the kids, while we figure out something more long-term." Emily's brows furrowed, a mix of gratitude and hesitation flashing across her face. "Jacob, I appreciate everything you've done, but I don't want to rely on charity forever. I need to stand on my own 2 feet. "And you will," Jacob assured her. "But rebuilding takes time. Emily, I know you're strong, but strength doesn't mean doing everything alone. Let me help you lay the foundation." Emily stared into her coffee, her emotions swirling. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this wasn't just another fleeting moment of kindness. But could she? "I also have connections," Jacob continued. "I can help you find work, something that uses your skills. You were always the smartest person in the room. That hasn't changed." His words struck a chord. Emily had spent so long surviving that she had forgotten what it felt like to dream, to think about a future beyond the next meal, the next night. "What kind of work?" she asked cautiously. "We'll figure that out together," Jacob said, leaning forward. "But first, let's make sure you and the kids have everything you need. Food, clothing, medical care, one step at a time." Emily nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll trust you." Jacob smiled, a quiet determination in his eyes. "Good. Because this is just the beginning, Emily. Things are going to get better. I promise." For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to believe in the possibility of tomorrow, a tomorrow where she and her children could thrive, not just survive. The following days passed in a blur of activity, each step bringing Emily and her children closer to a semblance of normalcy. Jacob worked tirelessly behind the scenes, leveraging his vast network of connections to ensure their needs were met. Within 48 hours, Emily and the kids were moved into a modest but comfortable apartment on the outskirts of the city. The space was warm and inviting, with soft carpets underfoot and sunlight streaming through wide windows. For the first time in years, Emily had a key to a door she could call her own. Liam's laughter echoed through the small living room as he played with a new set of wooden blocks, his cheeks flushed with the healthy glow of a child finally given proper care. Ellie had claimed a corner of the kitchen table, her nose buried in a book. Jacob had gifted her a collection of stories about resilience and courage. Emily stood in the doorway, watching them with a lump in her throat. This was the life she had dreamed of for them, one she had feared was forever out of reach. Meanwhile, Jacob wasn't content with just providing a temporary solution. "We need to think long-term," he had told Emily during one of their late-night discussions in the penthouse before the move. True to his word, he had arranged for Liam to see a pediatrician, ensuring his cough was thoroughly treated. He had also enrolled Ellie in a nearby school, where she could begin her education in a safe and nurturing environment. Emily marveled at how quickly her children had begun to adapt, their resilience shining through in ways she hadn't expected. For Emily, the transition was more daunting. Jacob had secured her an interview with a small, local business, a boutique that specialized in handmade jewelry. "You've always been creative," Jacob had said when he first suggested the idea. "I remember how you used to talk about designing and making things. This could be a chance to rediscover that." At first, Emily had been hesitant. Could she really step back into the world of work, after everything she had been through? The years on the streets had left her feeling disconnected from the confident, ambitious person she once was. But as she sat across from the boutique's owner, a kind woman named Clara who saw potential in Emily's story, she felt something stir within her. She accepted the position, vowing to give it her all. Each evening, when Emily returned home to her children, she found herself reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like a path she could walk with her head held high. Jacob's unwavering support had given her the courage to take those first, faltering steps toward rebuilding her life. And as she tucked her children into their warm beds each night, she silently promised them and herself that she would never let them go. Without hope again, months passed, and the transformation in Emily and her children was nothing short of remarkable. The once fragile family now radiated resilience and hope. Emily, now working as an assistant designer at Clara's boutique, had rediscovered her creativity. Her delicate yet intricate jewelry pieces quickly gained attention, and Clara began showcasing them as part of the store's exclusive collection. Customers loved Emily's work, often commenting on the emotion and detail behind each design. Every piece she created was a testament to her journey, a reminder of the strength it took to reach this point. Ellie excelled at her new school, her natural curiosity blossoming in an environment where she could finally thrive. Her teachers praised her intelligence and determination, often remarking how she seemed wise beyond her years. Liam's health improved significantly, and his once weak frame was now full of energy. He spent his days laughing, playing, and occasionally helping Emily sketch new designs at the kitchen table, his small hands eagerly copying her movements. Jacob, too, found himself changed. The experience of helping Emily and her children had sparked something inside him he hadn't realized was missing. No longer consumed solely by wealth and success, he began using his influence to help others in similar situations. He started a foundation dedicated to supporting single parents and homeless families, providing them with the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. Emily became an ambassador for the foundation, sharing her story to inspire others. One sunny afternoon, Emily stood in the living room of their cozy apartment, gazing out the window at the city below. She could hardly believe how far they had come. The walls were adorned with her children's drawings and photographs capturing moments of laughter and joy. The home, though modest, was filled with warmth, love, and the promise of a brighter future. She glanced over at the dining table, where Ellie was reading and Liam was building a tower of blocks, his giggles filling the room. Her heart swelled with gratitude. When Jacob arrived later that day for a visit, the children rushed to greet him, their laughter echoing through the space. Emily welcomed him with a smile, her once wary eyes now brimming with confidence. "You've done so much for us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Jacob shook his head, a soft smile on his face. "You already have, Emily. Watching you and your kids rebuild your lives, there's no greater reward than that." As they sat together, sharing stories and plans for the future, Emily realized that life had given her a second chance. The road ahead wasn't without challenges, but she no longer faced it alone. With her children by her side, the support of friends like Jacob, and the strength she had rediscovered within herself, she knew they could handle anything. The woman who had once sat on a cold sidewalk with nothing but a tattered blanket now stood tall, filled with hope and determination. Their journey wasn't just a story of survival. It was a testament to the power of compassion, perseverance, and the belief that even in the darkest moments, a new beginning is always possible. And that, my friends, is the incredible story of how a chance encounter on a cold winter night transformed the lives of a struggling mother and her children. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that change everything. What would you do if you had the chance to help someone in need? Would you take that step just like Jacob did? Let this story inspire you to see beyond the surface, to look for opportunities to make a difference, no matter how small they may seem. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that show the power of humanity and resilience. Remember, it only takes one moment of kindness to turn someone's life around. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and take care of one another.